Cordy, and today you're at the owl sanctuary, and I first wanted to show you the barn owl, which is endangered, obviously. I wanted to talk about some modeler stuff today, as we tend to do on Thursdays. We, as in the general world, no, it's just me in it. But it's now about a week since I've had the Fractal FM3. Can't see it, can you? That's good. And so I guess the short version of what I'm about to say is that if you're trying to tweak a tone on a modeler, whatever it is, there can be a tendency in the modeling world for us to change too many variables at once. And what I'm advising is that you keep some of the variables the same so that you can actually get a sense of what each little micro change made to the tone. Hopefully that might be something useful, but there's more of it now in a more rambling way of saying that. Obviously I'm coming from the world of other modelers, NHX Stomp, I'll chuck that there shall I, and Iridiums and all that sort of stuff, and Hotone Ampero, Gigboard, Kemper. I just wanted to talk about one slight revelation that I'd had. Is it a revelation? Probably not even. Might be an obvious thing, but I'm not sure I've heard it said explicitly by anyone before. So if you think about like your signal chain, either with a real amp or in the modelling world, I think this point kind of makes more sense in the modelling world because it's an easier thing to do. But what's the most drastic thing that you could change out that would change your tone? In the real world, I think most of us would probably recognise that there's like some common ground between many drive pedals. You know, you've got a few different types of drive pedals, but a lot of them are doing a similar thing. So whether it's a fuzz or a tube screamer or a blues breaker, or you know, there's these different sort of categories of drive pedal, but they're all within that same kind of realm. Then similarly within the amp world, you've got various flavours. You've got kind of a Marshally take on things, and maybe a Fendery take on things, and maybe a Voxy take on things, and then sort of other variations within that. But you know, if you change between two Vox heads, would you notice the difference? Or between a Vox head and a Fender head, would you notice the difference? Or you know, if you someone change a tube screamer in your signal path without telling you which was which, would you know? I think one of the biggest things that can make an instant change, for better or worse, is the speaker or the cabinet. And in the modelling world, this is something that pretty much changes with every patch change, or you know, if you're auditioning amps and stuff. So if you're rolling through, I want to hear how a Mesa 2C Plus would sound, or I want to hear how a Fender Deluxe Verb would sound. The issue for me when auditioning that stuff is that the cab changes with every single you know, time you roll through the presets or whatever, and you don't really have any sense of how the things are actually sounding in that chain because too much is changing at once. So that's why in my HX Stomp life and in my FM3 life and in my real life, you know, I have a one speaker cabinet or combos. I'm used to auditioning stuff through a familiar kind of thing. So that's why I would advise you, if you're new to the modelling world or whatever, find a speaker cab that you like the way it sounds. So a speaker cab is to some extent an EQ, I think, right? There's a bit more than that in the modelling world. You know, you've got speaker response, you've got the way that the mics are positioned and all that stuff, and in the real world it's definitely more than just an EQ. But the way I think that the modelling world kind of treats the speaker part of the emulation, I think, is that it's an EQ, it's to do with room reflections, maybe there's a bit of an emulation of speaker breakup, whatever that is. If you're thinking about how you're auditioning kind of amps and stuff, you wouldn't necessarily, when you were trying to get a sense for which amp would work for you, you wouldn't want a completely different EQ curve for every single amp, or actually you're working with multiple different EQ curves, right? Because like a Dumble style amp might have a bigger mid kind of EQ curve, and then you've got a corresponding cabinet which was assigned to it, and then if you switch to like a Marshall, maybe that's got more of a mid scoop or whatever, and it's paired with a different type of speaker EQ or curve. So that's why I think it's worthwhile to just find kind of one speaker curve or speaker emulation or IR, or a small handful, so that you've got a consistent kind of place to gauge how you think that thing that you're auditioning will work for you. So it doesn't mean that you have to use the same IR across all devices, although that might be something that works for you. It doesn't mean that you can't change cab sims and all that sort of stuff, but I think it's when you're trying to decide which amp model works for you, or auditioning drive pedals, I think it makes sense to kind of have a consistent speaker emulation, cab, IR block, whatever it is that you choose to use. Try and keep that similar, so you're basically using a template so that your ears are kind of used to and tuned into what that cab sounds like, so you're actually hearing the difference between amps or drives. Just a little idea. Do a bit of a longer video today talking about my week with the FM3, but to be honest, I've got quite used to the interface now, so I'm kind of happy editing on the small screen. I've got used to the idea that a lot of the menus, so it'll basically stay on the last screen of the menu that you're on if you end up back in that screen, so that can be a little bit confusing until you're used to how that works. But so for instance, like you're on the second page of the amp model, looking at some deeper parameters, you basically, next time you come to look at that amp page, it doesn't revert back to the first part of the menu, it goes to that deeper menu that you were on. So once you get used to that, it's no longer really an issue. And again, once you get used to the interface, which is it's different to what I'm used to, that's all. You kind of do get a feel for how to make the presets, so I'm okay with it now. I was advised to use the software, but it's not actually the way that I program any of my other devices, so I wanted to make sure that I could actually get through potentially a gig kind of scenario if there was ever a gig again. With the FM3, I wouldn't feel particularly happy about not being able to know my way around the device with just the actual unit, so that was why I've been sort of stubborn and kind of ignored that advice, but it's working for me now, so that's good. That's basically my thoughts so far. Great device, got some great sounds in there. The menus you can get lost in. It's not exactly groundbreaking stuff from me. If there was anything useful in this video today, if you could like and subscribe. I've got a Patreon if you wanted to try out some of the backing tracks and stuff that I'll put in places throughout this video with some playing. You can also get my presets for any of the devices that I use, but FM3 particularly in this video, if you wanted to. If you use the Buy Me a Coffee link, I'll send you those presets. It's basically a folder. Anytime that I create a new preset, I'll drop that in that folder, so you can just come back to that via the link that I'll email you. If you wanted to make a one-off Buy Me a Coffee donation, that'd be a cool way you could support the channel. That's one of the ways that I think I can stay kind of impartial and not be just like a mouthpiece for corporations. That's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. I want to actually try and provide some kind of maybe advice or like little things that I've learned along the way if I can, and things that work for me and things that didn't work. I think it's important if you're going to demonstrate these things. Yeah, so there's the Buy Me a Coffee link. If you only use that if you can afford it, and if you wanted to, if you don't, that's absolutely no issue. Maybe donate to the barn owls. And yeah, if you could like and subscribe, that'd be cool, and I'll catch you around for one of these soon. Cheers.